Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today we're here to talk about something that has saddened us, the loss of Catherine Cohen, who died on July 1st, 2023, when a tree hit her car during the storm. Our prayers are with her and her family. We know this is a difficult time for them. So the Department of Public Safety continues to investigate this incident. We're still seeking additional information. We have some unanswered questions on times and people that called. That's something that you guys may be able to help us out with. Some of the callers that have mentioned that they called and couldn't get through, if we can get their telephone numbers, we can actually track those calls. And that will help on both ends determine what took place, why it took place, so that we can at least find out what took place during those 2 hours. From 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday, you guys know we had a storm, a pretty difficult storm. The region was impacted with this storm. From Illinois to St. Charles, we all had problems. Our call load went at this time we received 1,076 calls in 2 hours. That's a lot of calls for emergencies. Our normal call load for this date at this time last year was 457, and in 2021 was 386. So as again I mentioned, we received 1,076. So that did tax our dispatchers and our responders a great deal. Our dispatchers are part of the first responder unit. They're an essential part of first responders. Without them, we couldn't get our job done. So these dispatchers, in dealing with this 976 calls, this is 9 calls per minute that they had to address. So you can see how overwhelming it is. So I want to stop here for just a second to commend those dispatchers that were working that day, for police 911 dispatchers, EMS dispatchers, and fire equipment dispatchers on the job that they did. If you have never witnessed the dispatch center during a storm, is something to see. These people were great at their job. They're multitasking, but to get 1,000 calls, which is over 100% of what you're normally used to, is taxing. So I want to make sure we talked about that. Before, the city leaders have talked about 911 system and the fact that it was going to take time and hard work to pull it together where we need it. And that's what's taking place. So what we're going to do today is talk about the timeline so that you get a good understanding of what took place during those 2 hours. But I'm also going to speak about 911. I'd like to have more clarity on what 911 has done and what it's going to do. Now, I began in my position February 13th of 2023. The framework for 911 had already been put in place by my predecessor. I began to put it in phases, 1, 2, and 3, to move it forward. The first thing that had to be done is the merger of EMS and the 911 callers. That took place in March of 2023. The second step of that first phase was the pay raises. How do we hire and maintain, retain employees? So with the assistance of Mayor Jones, in working with the labor negotiators, pay raises were given for all first responders. Police received bonuses and pay raises, firefighters received pay raises, all dispatch centers received a pay raise, trying to make them more competitive with our regional partners. Those pay raises come into effect this month. As you're aware, July is the beginning of the fiscal year for the city of St. Louis. And we've been working on this from February, March, April, May, and June. And we have achieved these pay raises that now we're able to begin recruiting more people with a sizable increase in salary. So we're excited about that. We know it's going to take a little more time. We're working with our Department of Personnel to achieve these goals. But that was the second step in the first phase of the 911 system. So how does it work? So when a call taker receives a call in 911, that call taker, if it's a police call, they send it to the district dispatcher. So we know we have 6 districts in the police department. That dispatcher then will prioritize that call to make sure the right district gets it and that they can send out an officer based on the priority of that call. If they don't have anyone available, those calls will wait for someone to become available if they're less serious. If they're more serious, then they send someone from a different district. That call taker will also transfer calls to EMS or fire. If that call taker is unable to get to a call and answer a call, we have a system called the Viper system that will automatically roll someone on hold and ask them to push 1 for EMS and 2 for fire, and to hold on or push 3 for police. So once that person pushes 1, their call is immediately sent to an EMS dispatcher. If they push 2, it's immediately sent to a fire dispatcher. Right? That way we can get the calls out in a quicker time period. The second phase of the EMS was the cross-training. Now, we're about 40 vacancies short with 911 dispatchers. We're about 10 or 50% short with EMS dispatchers. All right, fire dispatchers, we're pretty close to our numbers. Filling those positions are going to be critical for us, and it will take us a little time as we get applications and go through those applications to fill those positions. Cross-training with all the 3 different branches is our phase 2 of the program for 911. We have created a new position, which is Public Safety Dispatcher 3, and this dispatcher will be able to dispatch calls for police, calls for fire, and calls for EMS. Currently, our fire dispatchers can already dispatch for EMS. Many of them have been cross-trained. We want all 3 units cross-trained, but we can't start that cross-training until we build our numbers up with dispatchers. When we're about 75% of capacity with dispatchers, is when we can take someone away from their job and start training them. If we do it at the level that we're at now, we will have an impact with dispatching. So the calls are getting dispatched and we're responding to them. So the third part of our third phase of our 911 system is the construction of a state-of-the-art facility for a public access point, or PSAP, where we house all of our dispatchers together, police, fire, and EMS. We'll have SEMA there as well. We intend to construct this PSAP on the west end of Fire Department headquarters where you are. This project is a $42 million project, and those numbers are from 2022. We're anticipating, and we had asked the state to help us by providing $20 million. However, we did get $10 million, and we have about $30 million now, so we still have some work to do to realize the PSAP, from construction to move-in. Our anticipated move-in with the PSAP will be the last quarter of 2025 or the first quarter of 2026. Now, this is a 17,000 square foot, 1-story building that we think will really aid us in how we are receiving and dispatching calls along with the cross-training. We think we'll be able to handle any call load. Now, I do want to emphasize no matter where our capacity was on February 1st, 2023, that was too many calls for us to think that we can handle each one of them. I mentioned to you how many we had in the previous years. That's over 100% more increase in those calls. So it's already challenging. Along with the PSAP, we're planning to construct a 8,000 separate building, 8,000 square foot, 24/7 daycare for first responders. We believe that with young families, this is a good way to entice people to work for us and retain them, and having a place that they can take their kids and be comfortable with their kids being cared for. So I'm now going to ask that we kind of go over the timeline with the fire department and who went, so that you'll know exactly what we were faced with in the response to the incident on July 1st. Is the chief going to come up?
Mike's going to go down.
So Chief Richardson is our fire alarm manager for EMS and fire. So he's going to come up and he's going to talk about that, and then we'll address some questions after he's done.
Thank you, Director. The call was an EMS rollover call, which means that if EMS doesn't pick up the phone within a minute and a half, it automatically rolls over to the fire side. That was typical. That's typical when you're this busy. Okay? So the call came in at 16:18. Call came in at 16:60, I'm sorry. It was completed at 16:18. We dispatched the first unit, which was pumpers 26 and 32, at 16:21 respectively. 803 was the battalion chief, was also dispatched. In context, the 26s are coming from Margaret and Taylor, and the 32s are coming from Gravois and Grant. Both of those are considerable ways away from the incident. But because everybody else was out of service, that's what caused us to have to dispatch companies from so far away. During the course of them being en route, Pumper 7 struck in service, so we discontinued engine 36 and sent the 7s, and that was at 16:22. Engine 14 came in service, and so we canceled engine 32 because both of these guys were closer. The first person on the scene was truck 7, and they got on the scene at 16:24. The second one was the battalion chief. He got there at 16:29. I'm sorry, engine 14 got there at 16:26. There was no rescue squad available, but when they came in service at 16:25, we dispatched them and they got there at 16:26. That's it.
Any questions right now?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of people say that dispatchers often might be understaffed. You mentioned it now. Can you clarify how many dispatchers were on duty at 3 or 4 o'clock on Saturday?
There were respectively 3 fire dispatchers and 4 EMS dispatchers.
There were 5 911 dispatchers.
For a total of 7.
Yes. Well, you had 5 911 dispatchers, and in the same room you had the 4 EMS dispatchers. Now they're doing different jobs, but in that room you had the 9 dispatchers, and here at fire department headquarters you had the 3.
And that's our normal staffing.
Hey, can you say again, did you say both of the original vehicles that were dispatched were both canceled because others were closer, or just one?
Both of them.
Both of them.
Sir, this accounts for when responses took place, and it seems like a reasonable timeline for that. But the concern appears to be in trying to get through to 911. Can you account for what happened before this call got through and they were able to get these vehicles dispatched?
I can't see you because of the light, I'm sorry.
I'll go this way.
Good, thank you. What takes place when you get that many calls, they begin to stack up, meaning you're answering a call. I mentioned to you that we were getting 9 calls per minute. So someone's going to wait, and it rolls over. Now, I mentioned also that we were still looking into this matter, and I asked if you guys could help us get the phone numbers of those people that said that they were waiting. We will be able to track their call and be able to give a better response to when they called, if they were on hold, how long they were on hold as well. Without those numbers, it's difficult for us to gain that information.
Director Coyle, could you recap, just to be clear, how many dispatchers were on duty and how many should there have been under optimum staffing levels? If you talked about a shortage, how many short were you today of dispatchers?
Well, our post for 911 was 5. They really normally would have between 5 and 10, but they have worked with less than 10.
Are you including the call takers into that dispatch number? How many call takers were working during this 2-hour period?
I think we had about, I don't know the call takers. Do you know the call takers?
Takers we had during that time frame is there were 4 actual call takers with an additional 5 dispatchers on the police side with 1 supervisor.
So there were 4 call takers responsible for answering 9 calls per minute?
Oh, no, the 9 calls per minute is not only 911, but yes, that's correct.
There are some researchers and advocates in the 911 space who suggest that better technology can give you a heads up on where the calls are coming from. Can you give us a better idea? Are dispatchers picking up calls blind with no clue what corner of the city they're coming from? Do you have any idea where the call is coming from? Can that location help you? Are there efforts to find technology like that?
Yeah, that is in Central Square. If we do, we don't have it on.
Now, so we don't have that technology as of yet. I know that we're moving to Central Square with all of the dispatchers, and part of the ARPA funding was to provide software updates for the dispatch center. So it is that type of technology that we're looking for as we move into our PSAP, and once that is constructed.
Do you know how many calls went unanswered or 911 had to call back during that 2-hour time frame?
You should have that in your notes, Major, do you?
What I have on that is, as the director said, there were 1,076 total calls for service during this 2-hour window. So that includes 605 of those were just 911 calls. The other 400 were non-emergency calls and total calls. When a call is not picked up, it goes automatically to the Viper system, allowing the individuals to press their choice if they needed fire or EMS. I think another thing that's really important for the public to be aware of is these calls are answered in the order received. So if they call and they hang up and then they call back, they're going to the back of the line. And that's causing a lot of challenges and frustration on the public's end because they're trying to get through, but the way the system is designed, by hanging up, you go back to the end of the line. Also, what happens is when you hang up on 911, there is an automatic automated callback, which is critically important. So as the director indicated, the things that we need to know from the public are if they contacted 911, what number they contacted from, because we can track that. But what is also important for everyone to know is if there was some sort of busy signal or telecommunications challenge, we would need to know that too. There are 21 lines, basically 21 trunks or phone lines that come into the police dispatching center. When those lines are full, they automatically route to the next nearest dispatching center. And as the director also mentioned, this was really a regional weather catastrophe going on. The St. Louis County PSAP was also overwhelmed, and they have 34 lines. And some of those calls were being trunked over to us. Our dispatchers and 911 call takers were doing a reasonably well job under the circumstances in getting the calls answered and getting them dispatched during this time.
Just to clarify though, of the 566 911 calls, how many went to the Viper system?
I don't have that data. I don't have that exact data. But what I can tell you is if someone didn't answer the call, it automatically went to the Viper system.
Can you talk about the priorities when it comes to the call? Because obviously this lady, it was the most serious issue that happened. And I remember I spoke to one guy, a restaurant owner, and he said he started reporting on Instagram Live because they couldn't get through. And it was 3:54 when I saw that video. And I think you said 4:15 or so when they got to the scene. What's the national standard for you guys to get to a situation? How do you prioritize one incident over another? Do you have first responders leave and then go to somewhere else if it's more serious?
Would you like me to take that?
I wanted to understand the question. Do we have first responders leave and go?
How do you rank the priority? Like, you said that you categorize calls by priority. If, you have first responders in another incident, but a more serious incident happens, you don't have any
Okay.
other.
So you're talking about all first responders,
Yes.
not just police.
Yes.
Once you're on an incident, you're on an incident. And I think what you're asking is if we got a call for this and it was a serious incident, would we pull someone off another incident somewhere else? And that's a decision that the dispatcher would have to make if it's a serious enough call. But many of those calls were just as serious. So that's going to really take our more investigation into what took place. This is why those numbers that I and the major spoke about are important. Because until we have the numbers of the people that called and said they were on hold, we really just don't know what took place with them. And once we get those numbers, we can identify where their call went, what time it went there, if they hung up, if they did not hang up, so we can better answer that question.
Well, what's your national standards to respond to a scene?
You mean the time we get to respond? The fire department is what, 3 to 5 minutes? 4 to 6 minutes? Okay, but now, when you ask that, you have to ask it in the context of July 1st from 3 to 5. That is not normal. And so I don't think you can put that in the same bucket with everything else, because our equipment was all over the city. When Chief Richardson mentioned to you where the first responding company came from, it's miles away. Margaretta and Newstead. And you're going to the Grove, Vanderbilt and Manchester. That's a little far. The second company came from Grand and Chippewa, or Grand and Gravois. That's a long distance. So that happens when we have so many calls so quickly. In a short period of time, everyone's working. All of the fire trucks, all the medic units were going to different calls. As they returned to service, the ones that we knew were taking a long time to get there were canceled and the closer unit was sent. That's a normal operation for the first responders.
Director, can you
Is the state funding that you're hoping to, the state funding that got vetoed, I mean, how, to the public watching this and saying, okay, we're gonna build this new facility, but now we're missing $10 million. How will that impact your ability to get something new online?
Well, it may have an impact, but we have work to do. And we're going to have to find the $10 million because the PSAP is critical. It's critical to the safety of our city. It's critical to the safety of our city. It's critical for the first responders as well. So we're going to be working to see if we can find the funding to complete the construction of the PSAP, as well as to take care.